Welcome to episode 3 of A Catch Up, a new podcast from the Daily Catch where we take you inside the news. My name is Walter Mullin, and I am the publisher of the Daily Catch. Emily Sachar is on assignment at the moment, so today I'm joined by Jake Bernstein, the managing editor of the Daily Catch. Jake, welcome.
Thank you, Walter.
In this podcast, we discuss stories that have appeared in the Daily Catch. We give you insights into how we put the stories together, offer some additional observations, and discuss where the stories may be heading as we move forward. Jake, are you ready to catch up?
I am.
Great. Since you're new to the podcast, Jake, and also new to the Daily Catch, why don't you start by telling our listeners about yourself?
Sure. I've been a journalist or done journalism for more than 30 years. I started as a freelancer in Latin America and then became a daily reporter in Texas and went on to be a weekly reporter in Miami, Florida. Then I was the editor of the Texas Observer, which is a wonderful weekly in Texas. And then I started to do a lot of investigative reporting. I won a Pulitzer Prize for my coverage of Wall Street in the financial crisis of 2008 for ProPublica. And then I was a senior reporter for the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists on the Panama Papers project. After that was finished, I wrote a book about the Panama Papers called The Secrecy World, which was turned into a Netflix movie called The Laundromat.
So the impressive set of credentials like that, Jake, what made you want to join our small but mighty team at the Daily Catch?
So there are a couple of reasons. When I was the editor of the Texas Observer, I had a team of young reporters that I unleashed upon the Texas legislature. And it was just great fun to sort of work with them, to see the news through their eyes, to help them grow as writers and reporters. And after that, I gave lectures. I've given lectures occasionally at different universities, but I really haven't had the opportunity to work with young journalists to help them sort of refine their craft. And I really loved that component of the Daily Catch. But I also think that journalism, unfortunately, is in crisis in America. A lot of newspapers have closed. A lot are being bought up by private equity and hedge funds who really aren't interested in news and journalism in the way that I see it. And if we're going to start restoring that, a big component of it is going to be hyper-local news. And so I kind of feel like this is an important thing to do at this stage of my career.
Wonderful. Well, we're happy to have you on board.
Thank you.
So let's start talking about the news. Our first story might not be a pleasant story to read about or discuss, but it's an important news story in the village of Red Hook, the crisis at the wastewater treatment facility. So, Jake, could you start by giving listeners just a quick overview of the story and what we've reported on so far?
Sure. So this is a smelly story, and it begins around 2001, I think, when Red Hook Village acquires a wastewater treatment facility that was run by the Red Hook Commons. They then build a new facility next to that one, a new unit, and connect the sewer to that. This is all part of an growing expansion plan for the village and for Red Hook, the town. But as early as 2023, neighbors start to smell really bad things in the air and become concerned. For a long time, they can't figure out what's happening. They begin to sort of check out their own septic systems, even their gas grills, to try to pinpoint the smell. But then they sort of realize that it's coming from the wastewater treatment facility, and they start to complain. Unbeknownst to them, the EPA and the Department of Environmental Conservation, the DEC in New York, have already been coming down on the plant because they're testing the water and it's not coming out good. So this all sort of culminates in two things. At the end of last year, the village brings in an outside consultant who sort of tells them really for the first time just how bad things are, and they're really bad. And then the neighbors, the residents around the plant, do their own water testing and discover that, yes, things are really bad. That basically partially treated sewage is being released into a nearby tributary, which is heading into the Sawkill and then into the Hudson. And so all of this culminates in a meeting that happened last week about this very issue, where on Zoom and in person, I think about 80 people in Red Hook showed up.
And one thing very important that happened just before that is these residents formed their own coalition. And I really applaud them for coming together because I think that did get the attention of the town and the village as well. Let's just drill down a bit into the timeline because I think the time on this story is important. So 2023, the first indication of smells and distress from neighbors.
Right. So again, the village takes over the Red Hook Commons wastewater treatment plant in 2021. Even before they fully sort of start up their own wastewater facility in 2022, the EPA is already sort of putting out violations. There's some question about what those violations really mean. The village says that some of it is administrative issues, but there were already problems, right, by that point. In 2023, the full operation of the wastewater treatment plant begins. So that's the second part of it, the second unit. But by the end of 2023, residents are complaining, as you said, about the smell.
And just to pause for a moment, was the village talking to residents about this proactively or not?
Well, this is an excellent question. This is one of the real issues at the heart of this story is that residents were sending emails and they were calling about the smell. And they were getting responses back from the village, but usually it was sort of blaming, dry weather or a malfunctioning odor control measure, or not really, they weren't really satisfying answers to the residents who were complaining, particularly because maybe the smell would go away for a little bit, but then it would come back. So they weren't really getting a fulsome response, and they certainly weren't being told about what we found out subsequently, which is that the EPA and the DEC have repeatedly cited this wastewater treatment plant for really bad violations of water quality.
And the village brought in their own consultant, you said, in the fall of 2024?
This was the winter. This is really November, December
2024.
Of 2024. And that was the first time in December, at the end of December, when the village, in their meeting minutes, this is not something they really publicized to the community in any kind of wide and open way, but they did discuss it in a meeting where they acknowledged that there's significant problems. And then by January, in the beginning of 2025, then there's this additional water quality testing, which sort of leads to, the mayor calling for this public meeting.
What has the village promised residents it will do right away?
So there's going to be another meeting in early May, but basically what the village did was they brought in a new wastewater treatment operator. They fired the one they had, or they didn't renew their contract, and they brought in the consultant who had looked at it at the end of 2024, Delaware Engineering, to try to sort of fix the problems.
Have they been able to fix or do any immediate repairs? Do we know?
Well, no, not really. I mean, at the moment, they're trucking out the waste that goes to the old unit, the one that they inherited from Red Hook Commons, that sort of treats the solid waste, and the new unit kind of treats the other stuff. And so the old unit is basically non-functioning. It hasn't functioned in quite some time now. And so they're trucking out that waste, which is not obviously a permanent solution. And then the new unit, there's supposed to be like 3 layers of treatment that they go through. One is the waste goes to the bugs, they call them. This is bacteria that they bring in that's supposed to break down the material. And the bugs have been dying. They haven't been able to keep the right quotient of bugs in this thing. And they're still trying to figure out exactly why. They have a good theory, but they're trying to test that theory and see if they can grow the bugs again. Once the bugs go through, they go to sand. It sort of mixes through sand. And they haven't been able to keep the sand layers in place either, which they actually think is tied to the problem with the bugs. The flow isn't right, and there's so much flow going through that it's washing away the bugs and washing away the sand. And then it's supposed to go through a UV system for the final treatment before it's released into the tributary. And the bulbs don't seem to be working on the UV system. So they're trying to replace all this stuff and sort of, figure out what will work and what won't work. So Delaware Engineering is doing that. Meanwhile, the village has promised to be more open. They're going to communicate in a more fulsome way with residents. They're going to create a web page on the village website that'll be dedicated to this, where all the documents will be up there, the water testing, everything, all the plans. And then they're going to do another meeting in May, first week of May, I think, where they will hopefully have some good news that they've been able to restart this plant.
Like it or not, we're all going to become experts in wastewater treatment.
Yes.
What are the broader implications of this in terms of the sewer expansion project and the Cookingham development?
I mean, that's an excellent question. So the mayor was quite pointed about this. I mean, she said, if we can't get this fixed, there will be no expansion.
Or they'll be put on pause.
Yeah, or it'll be put on pause until they can get it fixed. You know, I mean, she said we don't deserve to have an expansion if we can't actually make what we have work. So, you know, everyone who's been thinking about these projects and really sort of the long-term development of Red Hook has got to be looking at this whole matter quite closely.
So this story continues to unfold. What questions are we looking to still get answered, or what events are we watching to unfold?
So this is also a good question. There's a lot still to be discovered and to be learned. I mean, the big sort of question is whether Delaware Engineering will be successful in the things that they're doing to try to get this up and running. So that's probably the biggest issue, right? The second one is really trying to figure out what happened. You know, why was it allowed to deteriorate to this degree that we've sort of entered a crisis mode? And then the third is there going to be remediation? The neighbors have said that wildlife has basically died in the area because of what's been going on these past few years. You know, they used to see a lot of animals and birds and frogs and peepers and things like that, and it's all kind of gone away. And so the residents really want some kind of plan to try to restore the environmental damage that they believe has happened.
So it's a big, messy, complicated story that we'll keep following.
Yes, absolutely.
Great. Let's move on to our next story. This week, the Rhinebeck Village Board approved the formation of a Comprehensive Plan Implementation Committee, a volunteer body that will oversee the execution of the village's 2024 Comprehensive Plan. Let's start, Jake, by giving our listeners a brief reminder of the Comprehensive Plan. What is it, and why is it important?
Sure. This is a great story. I happen to love it. There was a comprehensive plan which was done in 1993, and it was basically put on a shelf and never really looked at again. And so they decided to do an update of the comprehensive plan, and it took about 2 or 3 years. They finished it, I think, last September. And I think as many as 1,000 people worked on it, at one point or another. And it's a great opportunity, a comprehensive plan like this, is to think about what you want your community to look like 10, 20 years from now, to really sort of imagine all the great things that you can do. And they came up with a lot of stuff. They wanted to create a new sort of village green where the community could gather and there could be concerts or things like that. They wanted to do climate smart practices. They wanted to have more diverse and affordable housing and to sort of increase the housing stock, even if it's just sort of the mother-in-law apartments behind people's houses. They wanted to revamp the zoning code. So there's a lot of sort of stuff that goes into a comprehensive plan like this. It's a big document. The question is, does it end up like the last comprehensive plan? Does it just get put on a shelf and ignored, or does it actually become reality? And that's what this implementation committee is about.
So talk about who will be on the committee. What types of people will serve in the committee?
So the committee is going to be all volunteer. And it's going to be, the idea of the committee is to help prioritize the objectives of the plan, of the comprehensive plan. It's going to have 7 to 9 members who will be appointed by the mayor with board approval. Membership will include 1 trustee, 1 member from the Planning Board and Zoning Board of Appeals, and 1 representative from the Climate Smart Task Force. And up to 5 at-large members will also be appointed. And they'll be selected based on expertise in areas like planning, architecture, sustainability, and historic preservation.
And about those at-large members, there was some friction at the meeting around who would qualify to be an at-large member.
So there was a little bit of a debate at the meeting, at this implementation, at the vote to create this implementation committee, about whether it should just be village residents or it should be more broadly open. And the argument for opening it more broadly was that there are a number of business operators, business owners in the village who don't necessarily live in the village, but obviously want to have a stake in the comprehensive plan and its implementation. And eventually, that is sort of the viewpoint that won out. except that they're hoping to sort of prioritize or give a little bit more weight to village residents.
Do we know where the committee will start, what the first project or two might be, or is that still to be decided?
That's still to be decided. Initially, they'll meet sort of quarterly, but I think in the beginning they're going to meet monthly, because that's really what they need to decide, is to start to figure out, how do we prioritize this stuff? How do we move forward?
So let's pull the lens back just a bit and look at the bigger picture. And you touched on this a bit earlier, but why is this implementation committee significant? Why are you so excited about this story?
What I love about this story is, part of it is, it gives us the opportunity to sort of imagine what kind of community we want to create. But I also think this is perfect for a newspaper. This is what a newspaper should be doing, right? No, but most people are not going to read the comprehensive plan. It's a big document. They don't have the time. They're busy, and that's understandable, just like most people are not going to attend the implementation committee meetings. But that's what the Daily Catch can and will do. We will be there. We will be informing the public about these things, and we will sort of together watch how this comprehensive plan unfolds.
Wonderful. So, Jake, we end every podcast with something we call our top three, where we give 3 recommendations to our listeners. I'm going to let you go first with your top 3 for the week.
All right. So my first top 3, Riverkeeper, the Hudson Riverkeeper, every May 3rd, does a Hudson-wide cleanup. This is for all the communities along the Hudson River, and you get together for 4 or 5 hours, and you clean the riverbank. And you would just be astounded by how much garbage ends up in our river, particularly plastic bottles and things like this. And so in our area, it's Tivoli and Rhinecilff host stuff. You can go to riverkeeper.org and sign up. It's a great way not only to meet your neighbors, but to actually take some ownership of where you live and do something about what is a significant problem. I've done it now for a few years, and I look forward to it. It makes me feel good, makes me feel like I'm doing something for the environment. And frankly, I wish it was more than once a year.
And this is on Saturday, May 3rd.
Yes.
Great.
And then, so my second one is, now that it is finally getting warm, and I hope that actually continues, because it's been quite the winter, I'm very excited about eating more ice cream. And my wife and I go to Holy Cow to get our ice cream.
We love Holy Cow.
We love Holy Cow. But I'm also really excited about trying Fortunes, which I have not tried in Tivoli, but looks amazing. And so I'm very excited about that. And then the third thing is Bard College's Southwoods Old Growth Forest. Most people don't know about this trail. It's just about a mile. The Southwoods Old Growth Forest is 70 acres of untouched old growth forest. It's one of only the 5 remaining virgin forests within several hundred miles of New York City. It may be the oldest oak forest in the Hudson Valley. And it's just a mile long, but you walk through this cathedral of giant trees, ancient hemlocks, old oaks, maples. They've dated the oldest tree on the property, they think, is from 1735. And it's an amazing trail to walk on, to sort of spend some time with these trees. They just tower up into the sky, and you don't get to see those kinds of old growth trees in the Northeast very much at all anymore.
And how do you find the trail? Where do you go?
So it's behind Montgomery Place. Most people know that on 9G. And you can just go sort of, it's almost exactly behind that, where the campus has Bard campus has a sort of an extension.
Behind the house.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
But you can also, just Google Bard College's Southwoods Old Growth Forest, and you'll find a map pretty easily. But it's something that everybody should check out at some point, because it's amazing. And
there are some nice waterfalls around there too, aren't there?
I think so. I mean, Tivoli Bays has stuff like that, which is a little bit to the north.
Great, good tips. Okay, here are my top 3. My first is season 4 of Hacks, just dropped on HBO, or it's being released on HBO. I love the show. I've been a huge fan ever since season 1. It stars Jean Smart and Hannah Einbender. And if you haven't watched Hacks, it's really fun to watch. They're half-hour shows, and they're just fantastic. And it's won a lot of Emmys over the past 3 seasons, deservedly. My second tip is Bubby's Takeaway Kitchen in Red Hook. They serve Mexican food. I've been a big fan of Bubby's. It started out as a food cart, a seasonal food cart on Hardeman's Orchard, orchard for years. I think about 2 or 3 years ago, they moved into Red Hook and opened an actual storefront. But I'm a big fan of Bubby's, so check it out. My personal favorite is their stand burrito with extra guacamole. And then finally, my last, this is not necessarily a tip, but just a shout out to the Milan Highway Department. I live in Milan, and the Highway Department in Milan does an outstanding job. Whether it's snow or fallen trees or flooding on the road from heavy rain, Glenn Butler and his crew are always on top of it and always do a really, really great job. So I just wanted to give them a shout out. So this concludes our 3rd episode of The Catch Up. We hope you enjoyed it. A big thank you to Matty Rosenberg and Jen Hammoud at Radio Free Rhinecilff for their help producing today's episode. Jake, it's been a pleasure catching up with you today.
Thank you.